Bonjour, hi, welcome to the stream, everybody. Super happy. I'm Frank Boucher. I'm a Microsoft Cloud Advocate, and today with me I have a special guest. I have April Edward. I don't know why I say Emily. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
And the only Emily I know is blonde, so it doesn't match at all. So, April Edwards, she's a senior. I don't want to make mistakes. Is it engineer or software engineer? Yes, software engineer.
Senior software engineer.
She's working also at Microsoft, so we are in the family today, and we'll be talking about deployment options and testing and DevOps and all those things. But she like, I don't know where to start. Like, for your bio, she's a triathlete. How do you say it in English? The proper way.
Triathlete.
Triathlete. So she's doing triathlon. Crazy athlete. Then those people are crazy. I know.
Yes,
I married one. And she does blogs, talks. I met her for the first time during the Ignite the Tour in Toronto, in Canada. So that was pretty cool. But you're based in UK, right?
Yes. But I'm not originally from the UK. The accent usually gives it away. But I am British. So.
Oh, excellent. And did I forget any major point on your bio? We'll share your blog. I will do that right away. But I will share also it at the end, so people who arrive late on the stream will still have it. Did I forget anything? You're focusing on...
No, that pretty much covers it.
Data center, like that's your primary focus, I think, right? Or
data center transformations and DevOps, infrastructure as code and automation are kind of my biggest area. So a lot of the projects I work on are transforming customers' applications or something that's on premises today, and then we're moving it into the cloud. So my team is build with, code with customers. So we're alongside the developers and the operations teams developing and deploying into Azure and transforming.
Awesome. And what do you have for us today?
So today we're going to talk about application delivery into Azure, but using DevOps principles. And the reason why we're going to talk about this is DevOps is a hot topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about DevOps, what it is, why it's beneficial, but then talk about how we can deliver our applications into Azure and use some of the built-in features and do it in Azure DevOps, the tool, as well. So we're going to kind of hit all those marks. And I think it's just uncovering things in the cloud that people don't always think about, or, maybe there's features that hopefully we unlock today and we can all learn something about something we didn't know before, and maybe a better way to do it in the future and to make our lives easier.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people don't know, because when we get started and things like that, we work on our computer. It's a little tiny project. Maybe it's only us, or maybe with a friend or something like that. So, it's fine to right-click deploy or use a very simple way. But when you get something a little bit with more people involved, or a little bit more structured, then like better tools are there to help us and make it more secure and everything.
Absolutely. And there's so much going on in the cloud, and people need somewhere to start. And it's always, maybe a small project. We work with a lot of customers that pick an application stack or a bite-sized project to transform. I've also worked with customers that are like, we have to close down our data center. We need to literally lift and shift everything into the cloud. So we see all flavors of it. But where you really start leveraging cloud is all the built-in stuff. So the platform as a service, software as a service tooling. And a lot of times we sit with customers that are like, yeah, we have this app. We've spent, X amount of years maintaining it. I'm like, oh, we have a product for that. So it takes out the maintenance stuff and allows people to be more proactive. And so that's why I'm really passionate about the tooling and the DevOps methodologies. There's always a better way to do it. So we've done it, we've learned it, just great, hands-on. Can we do it better and make our lives a bit easier so it's faster and more reliable down the road as well, especially in organizations where you have someone sitting over your shoulder and going, is this done yet? Is this done yet? Oh, and don't break that. Those are the two things that are everyone's biggest fear. Don't break it, and is it done yet?
Is it done yet? Nope. Why? I'm scared to break that. I'm not sure if this thing is still used. Yeah. Do you want to explain maybe a little bit basic, and then we jump in your demo and things? Okay, so
Absolutely.
Let me share your screen. And feel free, chat, to ask any question at any time. April can see the chat, but in case she's super focused, because you can feel, I'm sure you can feel just like me, the passion in his voice, in her voice. So if you have any question, feel free to ask, and I will raise the flag if she didn't see it.
Yeah, please do ask questions. I do get on a roll, but I love questions. So traditionally, when I talk to customers and, previous to lockdown and COVID, I would be in front of people and customers, audiences large and small. And I love having questions during my talks because that's why we do this. So I do, encourage everyone to ask a question. Frank's going to interrupt me and interject, and I'm going to answer it the best that I can. So, there's so many things about DevOps, and, there's theories, there's methodologies, and a lot of people read books. And I think it's really important to highlight the definition of DevOps, because if we walk into a room and if I were to ask each and every one of you to, define DevOps for me in a word or two or in a sentence, we will get a completely different answer from everyone. And that's okay. And it all is based, on our experiences, what our perceptions are. But when we're working with customers and deploying with customers, we really need something a little bit more tangible to show what we're delivering. And, I think what's really great is at Microsoft, we have a definition. My colleague Donovan actually wrote this definition. It's something that we use when we, talk about DevOps, and it's something we live and breathe when we're delivering customer projects in my organization in CSE. And it's really important that we have kind of a starting place. And we define DevOps at Microsoft as the union of people, products, and people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to your end users. And the key phrase here is value. We want to continuously deliver value, because as an operations person or a developer, you maybe are delivering a feature or some kind of application, but what's that value to that organization? So if you're delivering that feature, what is that value, not just a feature? And if you're an operational team, yes, we need to deliver an SLA to our end users and our consumers, but what's the value we're deriving, and how does that play back into the organization? So I think that's a really, really important definition that we like to talk about. We need to be able to bring people together and share common goals in DevOps, because it is about the people side of it, and it's the hardest thing to change, and we need to increase our collaboration and focus on improvement every step of the way, and DevOps doesn't really have an end state, and that's really difficult. So you need to be continuously improving. We really try to bring teams in to collaborate more and enhance their productivity. When I go in with a customer project, in so many organizations, everything's really, really siloed, and that's tough because all of you will know listening, you try to deliver a project or you have a great idea and you're getting blocked because it isn't secure enough or it doesn't fit some box that something you guys used to do as an organization fit in, and that's really frustrating. So being able to break down those silos and kind of make those people changes to bring everyone together and collaborate better, and to collaborate early and often is really key. And then we look at automation as a concept in DevOps. That's important, but we need to look at automating from not only just our delivery, but also our operations team as well. So kind of that beginning to end life cycle. So anytime you look at even this little circle on the screen here, we are doing everything in a very cyclical, automating everything from beginning to end in that continual cycle. So that's really important. And
I need
go
to
ahead.
interrupt you just for a brief second, because we got raid. A raid is when another channel is joining us to they watch our show. So at the end of a show, people can raid another channel. So the Visual Studio, they just finished their show, so they come with 51 viewers and joined us online. So welcome, raiders. We're talking about DevOps and explaining what it is before jumping inside different deployment strategy that we can have. Our guest today is April Edward, and feel free to ask any question at any time. We'll do our best to answer them. And yes, I have a Azure Function t-shirt. We're not focusing today on DevOps with Azure Function. It's just I had a talk this morning with Azure Function, and that's why I'm wearing that t-shirt. I didn't change. I'm not a superstar. I'm just a normal guy. So keep you the same t-shirt. So welcome everybody. Sorry. to interrupt you,
No,
April.
no, welcome everyone. So we were just talking about the definition of DevOps as being the union of people, process, and products, and delivering that continuous value to your end users. And that's really important. So we want to keep that in mind when we kind of walk through our delivery strategy and different ways we can deploy to Azure. We want to make sure we're delivering value. And now a lot of people talk about DevOps as a theory. We have a definition for it, but we actually have hard metrics to prove that DevOps isn't just a theory anymore. We have hard metrics thanks to DORA. So DORA is an agency that does research on DevOps and produces a report every year. And this is from 2019. So we know that these high performing DevOps companies achieve a lot more. We know they're deploying more frequently. They have faster commit to deploy, 7 times lower change failure rate, as well as faster incident recovery. So it's not just about deployment, but how well do we recover when something does go wrong? Because the reality is DevOps is not a magic wand. Like, something's going to break. But when you look at what your organization or what you're trying to achieve, of course you want to be faster time to market. You want to be ahead of the curve in your areas that you work in, but you want increased revenue. So, I would ask everyone here to who remembers Blockbuster? You used to go to a store, rent your VHS tape. This is before DVDs for anyone that's on the younger scale of the age range. Go rent your VHS tape, go home, watch it, and then you go back and I'm gonna get another movie, and there's nothing on the shelf, right? That was really frustrating. And then in comes Netflix, and Netflix has come in and said, right, order everything on demand, and you can. So DevOps is a great example of a high-performing DevOps company. Another great one is Uber. The old days of hailing, sitting, putting your hand up and hailing a taxi. It still occurs in certain cities, in major cities, but a majority of the time, everyone's like, let me call an Uber. Why? Because they're delivering the value to us as end users. I can demand my taxi, I can order it, I can pay for it, I know exactly where I'm going, I can track it, and that full end-to-end life cycle. They have absolutely become a high-performing DevOps company. And the biggest thing you have to keep in mind is why DevOps? Because if you don't do it, your competitors will. So we can use a lot of the tooling in the cloud to enable how we achieve DevOps, right, as an organization. So today we're going to talk about deployment strategies. So today when you're deploying stuff, you think of maybe in your organization, you deploy, your big applications maybe twice a year, and everyone's on call, and it's a big monolithic thing. And if you're in charge or in that position to have experienced it, you're pretty much crying and praying that nothing goes wrong. But every, twice a year, when you make this deployment to your big monolithic system, everything breaks. And you have people sitting over your shoulder, you've had downtime, and it's frustrating. And that's not great. So we need to look at better ways to do this. And we're going to talk about better ways to do this in the cloud. So the first thing I want to talk about is a rolling deployment. Now, in a rolling deployment, we're going to slowly introduce our new code or our new components to our environment. So we will slowly and gradually release that and test it in the environment, almost kind of like an integration test. So we'll roll that out across the environment. So you might maybe do it to your dev environment, then your test environment. The idea of a rolling deployment is you don't want to just go big bang into production, which a lot of us have done. We want to prevent that. Yeah, and that's your big monolithic issue. So you can run a monolith in the cloud, and that's okay. But if you're just doing one big bang approach, it's going to go bad. We all know it. We've all been there. And it makes me cry a little every time I have to go back and work with organizations that do that, because it's like, here we go. And then they're afraid to make the changes. So rolling deployment is a great way where we can update an instance of something and roll it out slowly using load balancers, maybe parts of our server farm, etc. So that's a rolling deployment. Next up, we're going to talk about is a blue-green deployment. Now, you have two identical environments, and now this is an ideal world. I think the reality is when I go walk with customers, the environments are not identical. Oh yeah, we have a test environment, but it's like old hardware and it doesn't get patched regularly. So in a blue-green deployment, ideally we want that identical environment. So production and that test environment is like for like. So they are completely up to speed. So let's say we have, maybe 4 servers on either side, right? Just in a small cluster. They're going to be equal and identical in a blue-green deployment. So your green deployment is your production workloads, or what is the production workload? It's active. It's what users are pulling to. You deploy your updates to your blue environment and test it, load, put some load on it, see how it reacts, do your integration tests. And then go, right, now we're ready to cut over. So you fully rolled out your changes, tested it, and then you cut over. Blue-green deployment's great, but it means having infrastructure in place to do that. In the cloud, that is so much easier than being on-premise today. When you're on-premises today, we've all been there, and you're like, hey, I need an identical environment. And if you're a developer and asking for that from your operations team's like, nope, we don't have capacity. Our sand's out. Oh, it's going to take us like 4 weeks to get that to you. And you're going to get the old hardware that's like rusting and dusty in the corner. We don't want that, right? So in the cloud, we can spin up an identical environment to achieve this. So that's a great benefit.
They go
Next up,
and make, resuscitate, relive the old PC that didn't work for many years. Yeah, I have something for you. They bring it, remove the dust.
Take it.
Yeah, it boots. So I will put your environment in there. It should work.
If they have to dust it off before they either rack it or plug it in for you, that's a bad sign.
Definitely.
I've been down that road. Yeah, we have this in the corner. You can use it, and you're like, thanks. I get the seconds. I didn't even get seconds. I got like thirds, something that's been there that no one else wanted. And that's so frustrating. But another kind of deployment we can look at is canary deployment. And this is similar to a rolling deployment. Canary deployment is deploying your new version of code into production while shifting traffic to that new version. A great example is using things like Kubernetes and containerization. So we can say, right, we can kind of direct the traffic to go across that new production environment slowly and gradually. So it is similar to rolling, and you can update your pods, but it tends to be code updates versus having kind of a rollout that you would have in maybe an infrastructure environment. So these are the kinds of deployment strategies. Another thing we talk about is feature flags. This is a great feature that's built into Azure DevOps, and a lot of other tools do have it. And it's a fantastic feature where we deploy the new feature to a group at a time. So you're kind of like, group 0 is going to be your IT organization, maybe a few VIPs, a very small subset of people. You test it, great. Then we enable the feature flag for the next group, and that could be maybe, super VIPs, or maybe a department. Maybe you have like a couple departments that are always willing to test the newest, latest, and greatest features, and it goes to them. Everything's happy, great. Then you roll it out again, and maybe to the whole site. Maybe, you have an office here in the UK, or you have an office in Montreal, and maybe the UK gets this new feature, and we use that feature flag to enable it. And as we roll it out to the UK, everything's blown up. We turn off the feature flag, and it automatically rolls back. So that's another great way we can deploy too. And these 4 things are great, but today we're going to talk about A/B deployments. And A/B deployments are going to be similar to blue-green, and we're going to just redirect our traffic across. So our A/B deployment means, we're going to kind of split this traffic, and we're going to come up with a really good use case of how we're going to use deployment strategy in Azure today.
Cool.
How are we going to do this? So we're going to use Azure. We're not going to use any virtual machines. So I talked about some of these solutions you can do with virtual machines. You can do with like Azure Web Apps. You can do with Kubernetes. We're going to use Azure Web Apps today, and we're going to use Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps is a fantastic product. It does a lot of things, and there are 5 components that make up Azure DevOps. And why Azure DevOps is really great is because it's cloud agnostic. So we allow DevOps for any language and any platform. And when I say any language, you could throw any language at me. And you're like, well, Microsoft doesn't do Java. Yes, we do. You could do that in Azure DevOps. You could deploy any code in any language to any platform. And what that means is you have an on-prem environment. Great, we can deploy to that. You have virtual machines. We have physical boxes. We can deploy to that. If you're a multi-cloud customer, absolutely. AWS, GCP, and Azure, we see it all the time. You can deploy to all those different environments. So it's very advantageous, and you can do testing on different types of platforms. You can use Mac OS, test on Android, Linux, and Windows. So it has such a great subset of tools in it. That's why we really like to use it. So these 5 components that make it up: Azure Boards, Azure Repos, Azure Pipelines, Azure Artifacts, and Azure Test Plans. I'm probably going to say Azure probably 500 times, but we're going to go through each of those components, what they do, and then we're just going to start building something and see how it works in real life.
On that show, like I should give 5 cents or something every time the guests say Azure, since it's all around Azure. So like you're just winning the pot right now. It's like
awesome.
I will be real. This is way too awful.
I will take it. I'm sure I can say it a few more times for you. So Azure Boards. What are Azure Boards? This is being able to track any unit of work, anything from user stories to epics to features to bugs. it's great from the PM side. So your project team can look at, how a project's going. You can put swim lanes in. You can run Kanban boards in it. You can run your retros from it. I mean, my team, we ran our retro at the end of our sprint today from it. We have a Kanban style setup, and we ran our retro. It's very much Scrum ready, and it helps you run your sprints, all your cycles, all your epics, all your features. You can communicate the deadlines. You can do tracking with Azure boards as well. And this is a really, really strong feature, one of my favorite features of Azure DevOps. You can assign tasks to your team, put notes in it, link things up. And you can also take Azure boards when maybe something's assigned to you and put, a notification in Microsoft Teams or Slack. It syncs to other third-party tools so that, maybe when something's assigned to you, you get an email and maybe an IM. So Azure boards is great for tracking
for the
and
viewers
getting all those ideas.
That could remember, or like if you're interested to learn way more, because today a board won't be necessarily the topic of the stream, but if you are interested to learn more, in episode 4 Jason N was sharing like automation of a alert or error management system, and we were creating support tickets in Azure DevOps boards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great. And we talk about, when we talk about DevOps and we talk about recovering from an outage, you can have a bug or an outage alert, put it in Azure DevOps and use it for gathering information and data and track it, tag people, and create a learning system in Teams. And I know exactly what Jason's done. It's fantastic. Check out that episode because it really puts that wraparound of how you respond to an incident. Because we're going to build something out today, but the reality is it probably will break. Azure comes with an SLA, and we're super diligent about our code and we're doing all the right things, but something will probably break. Someone will do something, or something will happen to it. So looking at how we recover from those incidences, that's a great episode. So that's a really cool set of features built into Azure DevOps. We also have Azure Repos, and this is the source control system. And it uses private Git and TFVC repos for within your teams. Now, the cool thing about Azure Repos is if there's some kind of data residency requirements from your organization, this sits within your Active Directory tenant. So it is, quote, privatized to your organization, but it allows you to, it's their Git control system built into Azure DevOps. You don't have to use it. You can integrate, other third-party things like Bitbucket and GitHub, and we're going to actually do our demo with GitHub today. But you can search your code, you create your pull requests from it, you can put branches in, you can watch all your files, commits, and structure it out, and it's really, really good. But again, you can use GitHub as well. You're not stuck to using repos or Bitbucket or another third-party tool that you might have and your organization already uses.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
TFVC, is it the same thing as TFS, or it's a different thing? It's just like a naming thing, or it's a
Team Foundation Version Control.
So it's different than TFS?
Yes, it's different than TFS. So TFS is the old Azure DevOps server on premises. So Azure DevOps, they've rebranded Azure DevOps several times at Microsoft because that's what we like to do. So it started off as Team Foundation Server, which then transpired into VSTS, so Visual Studio Team Services. Mm-hmm. And now we've called it Azure DevOps, which is cloud hosted. So everything I'm going to do is in the cloud today. We also have an on-prem version, Azure DevOps Server. And it's not as feature rich, and Microsoft's really moved this model of kind of consumption based, but putting a lot of the features into the cloud because we can be a bit more agile in the cloud and deploying new features out quite a bit. So yes, so it definitely is. So the Team Foundation Version Control is just another form of Git version control that you're enabled on Azure DevOps.
Okay,
makes sense.
Cool. Yep. I was just not sure if it was like a renaming, rebranding, or if it was like a new thing.
No, it's just a Git versioning.
Okay.
Git versioning. There's probably more history we could go into it, but that's not for today's show.
The short version of the story. That's fine.
Exactly. So yeah, Azure pipelines. We're going to be working a lot in Azure pipelines today, and this is effectively our CI/CD system. So continuous integration, continuous deployment. It's fully customizable, and I kind of mentioned before, you can deploy on premises to any cloud or any kind of hybrid environment. So you can deploy into Linux virtual machines or machines, Mac and Windows. So it's enabled to kind of run your code tests against any of that backend. We can do stage releases, and we can do kind of automated and manual approvals, and we're going to go through that in a little bit as well. And then again, we support things like containers and Kubernetes. So we've changed the naming in this. So we used to have a build and release pipeline. Now we have the build and then just pipelines, I believe they've called it. When we look at it, I'll remember the names. But yeah, it's where we're going to focus and spend most of our time today. So Azure Artifacts, this is our artifact repository. You can manage all types of packages. It does support NPM and Maven, and then enables you able to share your code efficiently. NuGet and Maven, and then other forms as well. So we do have, if you have maybe some kind of artifactory that you've used in the past and want to import that in, we do have a list on the website for what it supports. I've worked with customers that have kind of their own artifactory, and it's just an artifactory, which is great. But then we have to pull from that, and there wasn't any redundancy in it. So again, because it's cloud hosted, it's all fully redundant and comes with the SLA behind it, which is great. So there's no infrastructure behind this to manage that. And we can share out our artifacts and pull them into our pipelines. So it's a great enablement tool to anything that we have prepackaged in previously. Next up, the fifth final product of Azure DevOps is Azure Test Plans. This is going to allow us to run tests and log defects basically from your browser. We can track and assess quality. We can get full metrics of how our tests have ran, where we've been successful, where they've failed, and get full tracking of end-to-end testing, and make sure that we're testing things before they go into our environments, before they go into production. And Azure Test Plans is great for that full end-to-end testing that we want to do. So before I go any further, Microsoft acquired GitHub some time ago. So we're going to integrate GitHub today in our demo. So our source repo is going to be GitHub. And then we're going to connect into our Azure pipelines from the marketplace, actually. But we're going to use the Azure pipelines for our CI/CD control. So what do you think, Frank? Does that sound good?
Oh yeah, I'm excited. It's been a while
Cool.
since I play with the Azure pipeline, so I'm sure it changed a lot since I play with it. So I'm happy to, get back to it in a little bit more.
Cool. So let's take our use case of what we're going to be deploying today. So we have a website here. It's Tailwind Traders. Let me just fix my light so I'm not in the dark anymore. All right, there we go. So we have this website called Tailwind Traders. This is our production website, and basically it says here, free shipping for orders $100 or more. So this means any consumer that comes to our website spends $100 and we give them free shipping. Now, as all of us know, we have a website and someone in the organization wants to make changes for whatever reason. So in this use case that we're going to kind of bring up today, our marketing team wants to run a promo over the holiday weekend. Now, for those of you in the US, you just had Labor Day. For those of you in different parts of the world, we have, bank holidays. So think of it as like that Labor Day bank holiday weekend, right? That's a great time to test it. People are out shopping, they're out spending money. So we want to change this shipping threshold and change our website, because the marketing team wants to know, and the business wants to know, what value does that bring back to our organization? Will our consumers spend more on our website or will they not? So the best way to do this is, we're going to do some A/B testing so that we are making sure that half the people that are visiting our website see the new threshold of $250 and half the people see $100. Why? Because we can pull the metrics from that, because we're a high performing DevOps organization, and know that what effect that change had on our website and what that had on our sales over the weekend. So as the IT department, we don't really care about the sales numbers. I mean, we do, because this company, Tailwind Traders, pays our paycheck. But all of us have been there where, someone in the organization wants to make changes to websites to better the organization and have that visibility. So that's what we're going to do. So what I want to do first is I want to make changes to my website. So I did tell you my code is sitting in GitHub. So if I go to this next tab here, this is my GitHub repo where my code is sitting. I can go through it and say, yep, this is my Tailwind Traders website. Great, that's my code. I don't want to edit it in GitHub. Actually, I want to use an editor to do so. So I am partial to VS Code, only because it does some great things for me. So I have the code here from our website.
Let me switch us into the corner. Perfect.
Cool. So you can see us. Awesome. Yeah. So this is my front page of my website. We can see the free shipping here. We can see the $100 threshold. Now, I really like VS Code, and we talk about tooling. Now, tooling doesn't give us all the solutions in DevOps. It helps enable us in different ways. So I've worked with a lot of organizations and end users that are using Notepad++. So an example I had was recently I was working with some developers on a pretty good sized project, and we were coding out some stuff in YAML for our pipelines. So if you don't know what YAML is, we'll see it shortly, don't you worry. But it's yet another markup language. So we were making some edits, and they spent like a couple hours finding a missing space, and that is the biggest bugbear of YAML. I don't know if you've experienced it, Frank.
Oh yeah.
So you sit there and you're really frustrated. You're like, something's not right, something's not right. So for those of you that have not seen YAML, or those of you that have, this is the YAML file that will run our pipeline in just a moment. And it's telling Azure DevOps what to do and how to run it. And if I literally make a space here and go, I'm going to put a space in, that space will completely blow what I'm trying to do. And unless I can correct it and read it, it's not going to do us any favors. So it's really important for YAML's formatting to stay in the format it needs. So, right, this is our website, free shipping. Really simply, I want to make a change and make that $250. So that's great. I've made a change. I do have autosave on, so any changes I make get saved so that if my laptop crashes, I don't lose anything. But this is saved locally on my machine. This is on my developer machine. This isn't in GitHub yet. VS Code has a fantastic extension. In fact, it has a lot of extensions. I have Azure extensions here where I can look at my resources and access them. It has all sorts of cool things where I can use Remote Explorer. I can do, run bug fixes from it. I can deploy to Kubernetes, even running things like PowerShell, etc., Docker. All these are add-ins that enable me to do my job better as a developer. So for me, this is a critical tool. So I go into the GitHub source control extension right here, and I can see that you've made some changes. So I'm going to stage my changes, put a label on it, and I'm going to say change shipping to $250 for the weekend. So I've put a label against what I'm going to commit. So I've made changes to my code, and I'm going to push that code up, and that code is no longer now just sitting on my laptop. We can see down here that, yes, this is my developer machine. We're pushing it up there, and it's syncing it across. Okay, it's done. So if I open up my GitHub repository here and just refresh the screen, 21 seconds ago, Yay. I made a commit. Cool. So let's open up our commits. I can see what was changed in GitHub. So this is really important for things like version control and having full traceability of what changed in our environment. So if I go to deploy this and this completely blows up my environment, it shouldn't, but let's say it does, I have full traceability into the commit I made. It has my name on it here, Scuba Ninja, which is my GitHub username. No laughing, please. It's an old nickname that stuck with me for most of my life. So yeah, I can see what I've changed, what I've deleted, and that's great. So I've made that code commit there. I can, go down and, make a comment on it. So maybe this looks great, or, Frank maybe wants to come in and say, this looks terrible. And I can comment on my commit here. So we can full traceability within our teams as well. So I've made this commit. Can't see any changes here, but, I could go into it and I can see my whole history of commits, because I've actually, run these changes many, many times. I can see my comment here. I have full traceability and tracking. So it helps us kind of log what has been changed in our environment. So source control is really, really important. Now, this is great, but this is in Azure DevOps. So Frank, can you guess how we're going to get to Azure DevOps?
It's dev.azure.com, right? Something like that?
Yes, it is. So I'm going to...
And I only got it because I have it open on my other screen, because we also use that internally for our team.
Yeah, and I cheat. I have it saved as a favorite, so that's fine.
Well, it's
totally
super simple, but before I think, that URL was different in the past, if I'm not mistaken.
It was different.
Yeah.
It was different. So it is dev.azure.com.
But that's a good one. I think it's very simple that way.
I think so as well, and it's easily remembered. So, I mean, I can go into my Azure DevOps, but there's no connection. So we need to actually connect our GitHub to our Azure DevOps. So you might be thinking, well, how did you connect your VS Code to your GitHub? So I'm going to back up here, and I've logged in to Azure with my Microsoft account, and I'm still connected to my GitHub with my GitHub account. So I've authenticated through from VS Code. So VS Code is connected to my Azure side of it, but also the GitHub side. So it uses my Active Directory account to authenticate through. So I'm not having to memorize like thousands of passwords, but it creates a secure connection between the two, which is really important because your security team will go, hold on, is this secure? We need to talk about it. That always comes up. But let's connect this to Azure DevOps. We go to the marketplace here in GitHub, and we have these great things called extensions. So I'm going to type in Azure Pipelines and search for that.
Oh, interesting. I never did it that way.
There's, so many ways to skin a cat,
that's totally
right?
fine. I just of course it worked that way, but I most of the time I go in DevOps, and in your project when you decide where you want to go, you say I want to use my code from GitHub, and then it probably opened the page you're about to open, right?
Exactly. So we talked about this Azure repos thing, right? So I can absolutely import a repository. I can clone to my computer, so I could clone it to VS Code. The button's right there, and it does it all for me. I don't have any code in my repo, but I want to connect this to GitHub because we're already using GitHub as our organization at Tailwind Traders, and I don't want to change that. But we can import it this way, etc. But when you go to set up a new repo in a whole new kind of project, you get that option to say, I want to, start up, I want to pull it in from Bitbucket. And actually, I'll show that to everyone now because everyone likes doing things on the fly. So I'm going to create a new project in my Tailwind Traders organization, and I'm just going to go TW Project 2. Very exciting name.
Of course.
And I could, yes. I'm out of creative names today. So I can make this public. I don't really want to do that, but I do want to share it with members of my organization, or I could do a private repo if I don't want to share it with anyone. And we talked about this as version control. So the team foundation version control, or Git. I want to work in Git. I'm comfortable with it. And the work items. So I can say I want to be an agile organization or work in Scrum. It just turns on different features when you create a new project. So if I hit create here, it's going to create it on the fly, and hopefully internet doesn't go down and the demo gods are kind to us. It only takes a moment, only but a moment. So we have a brand new project here. We have all these 5 components. I can go into to repos, and again, I can initialize, add a README, and start my new project. I can set up a build, I can clone stuff, etc. So
just like in GitHub, it's very familiar.
Absolutely. So in GitHub, I can also connect it this way. My code's already there. I want to set up an Azure pipeline, and it'll ask you to set up a new plan or edit your plan. Now, I've already set one up, but I can go down and configure access. It'll give us the same visual. So we can see what other applications I've installed. For this case, I just have Azure pipelines on this repo. I hit configure. I need to enter in my password. And here it is. It tells me all about this marketplace extension. I can reference it. It was developed by the Azure Pipelines team here at Microsoft. And I can go down to the permissions and grant permissions. So I can choose which repositories have access to my Azure pipeline. So for this case, I'm only going to do my Tailwind Traders website. But we can go down into the list and say, I want to add a bunch of other repos and do it that way as well. But we're going to leave it to just this one repo. So when we hit save, it will then open up Azure DevOps, and we authenticate through. And that's when you enter your Active Directory credentials. So I've already done that ahead of time, only because every time I do that on the fly, I have to multi-factor authenticate and something breaks. So we've just kept this nice and quiet. So
excellent.
We've deployed our code. And actually, if I look at my pipelines here, this is effectively our build pipeline. This is our CI. This is our continuous integration. We can see that 7 minutes ago, this kicked off. And that's about the time when I kicked off my code commit. So I can go in here and say, oh, yeah, that's my code commit. I have the date. I have a timestamp. It took 6 minutes to run, and it built my code out. Now, I had a few warnings, and that's okay. I just want to see what went on, but I've already told my pipeline what to do. And many of you are thinking, well, how'd you build your pipeline out? And I'll show you in a second. But what does this pipeline do? So I'm checking out my code from master, running some NuGet commands, using Node, doing a build with Visual Studio, and running some tests. So in our build pipeline, this is where we want to run our tests on our code before we deploy it to any of our environments. So that it passed all those tests, then we're ready. So we can add in multiple tests, depending how we want to do that. And then it publishes this build artifact. So we talked about the artifacts component. So if you have previous packages you want to bring in, you can put them in the artifacts, Azure artifacts, and pull them in. But this one's going to publish it as part of our build component. So looking at the pipeline and how we did that, I'm going to go into our TW project 2, and we have a brand new pipeline here. So when I went to create my pipeline initially, there's two ways you can do it. You can do it in the GUI, but it's pretty much being replaced by YAML. You can't do both. So if you start doing something in the classic editor, you can't do YAML. If you do it in YAML, you can't go back. So you have to kind of pick an avenue to go down and stick with it. So again, Frank, you brought this up. We can click on our GitHub and say, where's our YAML? Maybe it's an Azure repos Git or etc. Or any other generic Git repo or subversion. So we can make that decision here where our code's going to sit. So maybe I do want to pull this from GitHub. Let's see what it does. Again, this is authenticating through.
We had a question earlier, and I was just waiting for you to hit the pipeline parts. From Jara was asking, one thing would be interesting is to explain the cause for the environment in pipeline. Never used them before. We normally just have separate stage in release for different environment.
Cool. So different environments. So this is great. I'm going to do this in my other test one.
I was not sure if you were about to talk anyway about it or not, but since now we are in the pipeline, I think it's easier.
So this is great if you're running resources and you want to group resources together. So I could probably pull it up. I have another kind of pipeline that I've grouped my different resources into environments. So maybe I have SQL Dev, SQL Prod, SQL Test, and I've kind of put them together. So I could just call this, let's call it SQL Test. I don't have a SQL environment, but a lot of times there's a database and maybe, there's no resources there, but actually I want to attach to my virtual machines. And it will allow me to group those together. So generic provider, it's going to be into Windows, or you could do a Linux VM. And I need to run a PowerShell script to connect those. I need to run it on those VMs or those resources, whether it be a Kubernetes cluster, and it registers those machines, those VMs, to that environment group. So if I'm deploying to an environment, that's one of kind of those variables I can add in my release pipeline later on. And this is really handy if you are running multiple environments and specific groups of servers. So again, running a front-end website with maybe a SQL backend, and you have different environments, you would qualify those in the environment piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, at least for me, let us know, Jara, if it answered your question or if you have other question. Or, just like Jara, if you have question, feel free to type it in the chat.
Yeah, and I mean, you can absolutely use separate stages. You can run things in parallel. It's just a really nice way to organize things and group them together so that you know what environment's what, so that you can't accidentally go, oh, I've deployed this to a dev, to production when it should have been, dev or test. So it's kind of another way to just ring fence those environments together and qualify that in your variable group in your pipeline. Cool. So yeah, so I wasn't going to go into that, but I'm really glad you asked that question because it's always good to have that. So I need to go back into create my pipeline again, just real fast. So again, we're pulling everything from GitHub. We can do the Azure repos. So it's going to go and read all the repos I have access to, and it will actually see the repo that we're working from, this one here. And what it's doing is when it does that and I go to import it this way, it's reading my repo and going, let me put together a script for you because I see what we probably need to put in it. It builds my YAML script, basically. It goes, right, I want to, every time I deploy to master, I want to run a trigger and automate this build. And I'm running these tasks. Now, it sees my YAML already in my repo. But I could say, you know what, I have a YAML file that maybe my ops team gave to me. I can take this out, delete it, and add it. And maybe it has things like security features or enablement or extra tests in it that wasn't in the original YAML file. So this is effectively my build pipeline, my CI pipeline here. Now, the other way is, again, for those of you that have used the classic editor, you can go and put it in that way, and it's more picturesque. YAML can be super frustrating, but once you get the hang of it, it's really a win, and it is much, much easier. But I always tell people, learn with the classic editor, see the visual, understand how everything works when you're doing your build pipeline, and then move into YAML. And again, it just depends where you're coming from with your background.
Yeah.
So this is how we got our build pipeline. So it just imported our YAML, it was all set to go, and it kicked off as soon as we submitted our code. And it's created an artifact effectively here. It's published our build artifact, but our artifact actually isn't anywhere at the moment. So it's not deploying to any environments. We just have our code ready to go. So what I want to do is I want to, yes, and I just saw that Matt Lebo, there is an assistant on the right-hand side for YAML. So you can go and type in the classic editor, you type in what you want to deploy. It gives you like a little picture and you pull it in. In YAML, you type in what you want to deploy and it gives you the code snippet. Absolutely. So there is help on the side. You're not completely on your own, but sometimes people struggle with the formatting of writing YAML, especially people that might come from an operations background. YAML's really, really quite new. But yes, once you kind of embrace YAML, there is help for it. We don't leave you out there to kind of do it on your own.
Yeah. The helper is very handy indeed.
It is. So, I could say I want to do some kind of testing. I can type in test. I can publish test results, run the Visual Studio test, which we're already doing. Anyone that codes in Go, you can run a test on Go application, .NET Core, etc. I can even type in deploy and say, oh, I want to deploy an ARM template here, or maybe I want to deploy an Azure function, Frank, because you love functions. So yeah, it gives you the code.
You just named the two things I like, ARM templates and and functions.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, if I want to deploy an ARM template in this build pipeline, I just need to pick what subscription I'm going to deploy from. So it has a secure connection built into it. I can go through all my subscriptions I have access to. And I need to pick one. Let me find one that I can use. I have too many, probably.
Probably.
Yes, definitely. There we go. That's the one I want. And I hit the authorize button here, and it connects a secure service connection to that for me. And it will pull that up, authorize that through. Give it just a second. So it creates a secure handshake, basically. And then you don't have to authenticate every single time. So I should be able to pull up my subscription. No results found. Of course not. Why would it work? That's okay. So, but I will basically fill out the actions where I want to create or update a resource group, find the resource group I want to have access to, because it's not clicking into my subscription at the moment. Doesn't like my tenant. That's absolutely fine. I can pick the location where I want to deploy to, et cetera, et cetera. And then I hit add, and it will add my task as a YAML output into my pipeline. So thank you, Matt, for pulling that out. So you can basically fill in the boxes, and it spits out all these great little tasks.
Snippet, right? But the form help you to fill the blanks instead of having placeholder in the code snippet. That form just help you, and when you specify your Azure subscription, then it will be able to read the resource group from your subscription, so it helps you to populate, so you don't need to type and risk a typo or anything. So everything is listed for you. So that's very handy when connections are working.
Yes, well, who knows what I broke already.
But there we go. Like you don't. Oh, it's working. Well, cool. Just just a glitch in the matrix. Common.
Yeah, you know what? It's being cranky. That's fine. So I can see all my resource groups that I have access to. So the one that we're potentially deploying into is this resource group, and again, I can pick my location. So I know in this resource group where I want to deploy it to. I'm going to go to, let's go UK South, because that's fun. And I can use a linked artifact, pull in my template parameters, and when I hit add, it will build that out and it will add the task for me. And if we go down here, there's my YAML task that I've just created. So YAML is less scary having the help on the side because you can fill in the blanks, authenticate through, and we can pull that in. So that's awesome. So cool. So we built our code. It's passed all its tests. Now we want to deploy it into our environment. So we've made that change. It's passed all the tests. We have no failures, which is fantastic. We've ran our tests early and often because we're a high-performing DevOps organization, but we need to build our release pipeline. So I've already built some pipelines previously, just in case the internet blows out, but we're going to build one together. So pending internet does go or any other voodoo. Yeah. So we need to select a template when we start this. So I want to work in stages, and each of my stages, I want to match my environments. So the person that kind of used their environments before, that's exactly what we're going to do. And the reason why we're going to do this is because this is effectively in the Azure portal, my Tailwind Traders application sitting here. It is an Azure web app, so it's platform as a service. There's no operating system to manage. It's load balance, comes with all sorts of features, and it's great. So we have a production environment, which is this right here. This is our production environment. Also in our environment, we have a staging environment. So if I open up my staging environment here, it's going to authenticate through. Nothing's going to break. And we have a staging environment. So if I click on the web address, I have my Tailwind Traders -staging.azurewebsites.net website. That should load, and it's my $100 or more. So right now, staging and production are completely identical websites. So just to prove that to you, we have production right here, and we have staging right here. So we are effectively running identical websites. We have identical environments. We're using Azure Web Apps, so we know exactly what's getting deployed to that. So in my release pipeline that I'm building, I want to deploy to an Azure App Service deployment. Now, when we talked about, we can do an empty job at a stage and build it out incrementally. You know, we can deploy to a Kubernetes cluster. Frank wants to deploy to a function. Here we go. We can deploy this to a function app with a slot. But Azure DevOps is going, yeah, this is featured. Oh, well, good news. We're going to deploy to a web app. So I want my stage name to match my environment name. So this is going to be staging. And in here, it's going to say, right, we need some settings. So we're going to authenticate to my subscription again and choose the subscription in which my staging environment sits. And we also have the option here to what type of application are we deploying to. So Azure DevOps, we've selected it's an Azure App Service. Great. We have options of web apps on using Windows or Linux, or web apps for containers, function apps, APIs, and mobile apps. We're going to do a web app on Windows. Keep it really simple. And it's going to go in and says, what app services are you running in that subscription? Well, good news. We have our staging environment here. So select that. That's good to go. Click on our deploy to Azure. And this is our task that we're going to run. This is what, after it says, right, this is our deployment process, this is our stage, what tasks are we going to run on this? So it does inherit the Azure subscription here, the app service type, and the app service name. So we can go, right, we did everything correctly, we got it deployed to staging. We can also look at where the packages are. We're just going to go with the default for now. And we have all sorts of actions and items that we can do. So we can, put scripts in, we can run other things, any other kind of additional deployment options, deployment methods. We're going to leave all of those alone for now, and we're just going to save this. And I can make a comment that's create staging, deploy, and we hit OK. And I go back to my pipeline here, and we have our staging environment. Awesome. Now, we can automate a lot of things, but I want to actually put in a post-deployment check. So I want to deploy our code to staging, but I don't want it to go any further because I want it to go to staging. I want to test it, make sure our staging website makes the change and there's no performance hits. So we have these things called post-deployment conditions in Azure DevOps that are awesome for so many things. I'm going to put in a post-deployment approval. So I need to add my approvers. Now, it's always recommended to use a group of people. You can use individuals, but it's always the hit by a bus theory. If you put a named individual on and they get ill, they're out, or they go on holiday or vacation, you're not going to have access for them to approve that. So I'm going to add myself just for now. I think I can probably add Frank. Find him. Oh.
It will be FR. Yeah.
What's your alias? I'll try and add you.
FR Bush. BOUCH.
There you are. So Frank's going to get roped into this. So I can say any one of us has to apply to approve it, or in any order. It doesn't have to be me or Frank, or it might have to be in sequence. So maybe I have to approve it. Maybe you need another approver, or a group of people. So maybe the first approver is someone on your IT team to check your code, or maybe someone in the ops teams. And maybe the next set of approvers is a group that maybe is, maybe the exec team, or someone that needs to see it, or someone higher up, a manager. So any one of us can approve this. So I'm going to rope Frank into this. He can actually approve this from his email. So he'll get an email alert. He's going to love me in a minute because I'm going to send so many approvals through. But I can add that through. And I can create a timeout. Yeah. After I've made friends with Frank and really annoyed him and sent him all these approval emails, I can time these out. So I could say, you know what, we're on a time schedule. I need this approved within, 1 day or something. Or I can even do a matter of hours or minutes. Oh, we're in a time crunch. I need this done in 5 minutes. If this is not approved in 5 minutes, my butt's on the line, so we need to push this through. So I could also say, the person requesting the approval who pushed that change can't approve it. And this is a great practice because putting policies and these kind of items in your pipeline are really good because it gives that checks and balances. So I've deployed it. Yeah, it works. We've all been there. We have a really tight timeline. Yeah, it works. It's fine. Let's just keep going. That helps prevent that mentality a little bit because we've all done it. We've all been under that time pressure. And then you could have to revalidate someone's identity. So that also helps you make friends, but I won't do that to Frank today. The other thing we have today are gates. Gates you can wait to do a kind of approval, and we add conditions. So maybe you want to wait 1 hour, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. We can do some great things. And gates are really cool. And I'm seeing them used more and more and more with organizations because when we're, achieving DevOps, we're deploying quickly. There's always the security person in the room, and we need to make sure from day one with our code, we're doing the right things. And that is branching our Git versions and having version control over our code, but also then checking, are we deploying to Azure policy compliance in the cloud? Maybe you want to invoke a Azure function to do something, or a REST API, or maybe we're running monitoring on our application and we need to query all the alerts to see if there's anything bad. And I'm actually running a project with a customer right now, and we're throwing Azure Monitor onto a Logic app. So we're adding this query function in so that when I deploy this, I know exactly what's happening. If there's any failures in that Logic app, we don't go to the next environment, and that we can stop and address the issues because we're transacting something that's quite critical to the organization. So we can put that in. And then we can also query work items. So we can execute a work item using Azure Boards, and that's really handy. And then auto redeploy trigger. So what if our deployment fails? Okay, our deployment fails. We can redeploy to the last successful deployment. So that kind of helps us revert automatically. I'm pretty confident that we don't need this. So we're just gonna tick all the boxes and do all that. Now, I talked about our build pipeline giving us this artifact. So I need to add in our artifact here. Again, we can pull these artifacts in from other places. So I'm pulling it from my build pipeline. We can use our version control. We can use GitHub, Azure repos, etc. I can pull it from another project that I might have access to. But from this build pipeline, I want to do it from our current website here. I can choose which version as well, which is really, really handy. I could specify the version at the time of release. I can do maybe a certain branch if you're really using a lot of branching policies, but I want to go the latest because we know our latest is our changes. Source alias is fine. We add that in. So that's great. We've added that, but we haven't automated it. We can also add a schedule. We can add multiple artifacts and multiple things we want to deploy. But Frank, what's the thing? Do you know what we can do next to automate this a little bit better?
Yes, lightning bolt.
Yes, it's always a lightning bolt. So I want to continuously deploy my code. So whenever we make a change, it goes straight to goes straight to staging and makes that change. And because we put on a manual check, we know it's not going to go past staging, so we can continuously test our code. We can add some branch filters in there. We can do a pull request trigger. I just want to know that, when I go through a successful build, all my tests pass, everything's good to go, we're ready to go. So I can save this pipeline and I can say staging pipeline. Okay. And we could actually just start deploying some code. We could create a release. Well, yeah, I'm going to do that. What's the worst that can happen, right? I'm going to release the code we just changed. We can make it a manual if we want to. We can check our artifacts. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So it's going to deploy to staging.
And now
I can
you're
click
doing
on this
it manually because we don't want to have to push again in our repo, but otherwise a new push would have triggered everything, right?
Yes. So for the initial build here, yes, it is a manual process. But from now on, anytime I make changes to my code, it's going to go push to our staging environment. So it's queuing. I can look at the full logs. This is a great time to go get a cup of coffee and some biscuits and let it run. And this only takes a couple minutes. So while this is actually running, we're going to go build out the rest of our pipeline. Because, well, it's great it's going to staging, but we have a production environment to think about. And our end users don't see staging. But what they do see is production. Now, Frank, it's actually one of my favorite features of web apps. What is a great feature of web apps that we can leverage today to help us leverage our production environment, but not deploy into production, but have an identical environment? Because we need that identical environment. So what can we do?
There's a deployment slot in a web app that we could use for that. Is it what you're thinking about? Yes.
Absolutely.
I passed the test.
Yes, putting you on the spot. So yeah, deployment spots are great. So I've actually cheated a little bit because I didn't save this from the last time. So what is a deployment slot? We're going to create a deployment slot. We're going to add a slot here. A deployment slot is an exact replica of what our main site. Now, it doesn't have to be an exact replica, it doesn't have to be a clone. But what I want to use a deployment slot for is creating a new environment that's exactly like for like. Because again, we talked about deployment strategies and we talked about blue-green, we talked about rolling. But I think the biggest issue is that so many of us see is they're like, yeah, I have this dusty box in the corner that's test or dev. And for lack of a better phrase, it's trash. Like, we all know it. Like, we can flat out say it. We've been given trash to do our development on or testing on, and that isn't fair. And that's not cool because it doesn't then work in production. So we want to get rid of that phrase, well, it worked on my machine, or it worked in dev and test. It's fine. So deployment slots are awesome. And when you're talking to your organization about why deployments are awesome, it doesn't cost anything. It's built into Azure Web Apps. So depending on the service plan you choose, depends on how many slots you get. So with my service plan that this is built on, I believe I get 5. So I can deploy 5 identical environments to test in or run against. So I could call this Frank's slot. And I have the option here to not clone settings or clone settings, but I want an identical environment to production. So I would select that and hit add. And you can see here, it gives me a website name so I can differentiate that. Now, the question is going to be, well, we have a company name and it does not end in azurewebsites.net. Our company name is companyxyz.com. You can bring your own custom DNS name to Azure Web Apps. So for this purpose, I don't have a custom DNS name set up, but we could have tailwindtraders.com as our custom DNS name. So cool. Frank has his own slot here. We can deploy to that. Absolutely. But right now in our web app, and I'll just go back to the web app real quickly here. We have this production environment. I have my app service plan. It's running. You can see the resource group and everything's happy. I can put some monitoring around it. I can see how much traffic is generated, and go to my deployment slot, and I have exact replicas of it. So before we go to production, Frank, where do you think we want to deploy to? We could use your slot. Do you want to use your slot, or do you want to use Canary?
we can use mine then.
All right, we're going to use Frank's slot. So what I'm going to tell Azure Web Apps to do, which has a front-end load balancer, we're going to split our traffic identically between production and Frank's slot. Why is this important? Because the business wants hard metrics on how our website performs and our sales numbers perform over this holiday weekend. So I'm going to split this traffic and I'm going to hit save. So it's updating our websites. Boom, we have literally split the traffic. So to prove this, we want to deploy the changes to Frank's slot, but we're not going to deploy it to production. So simply, we're going to add a stage. Okay, so this is going to be the app service deployment again. And where we would traditionally call this Canary or another environment, I want to match the name of Frank's slot to the stage name so that I don't get confused. Because traditionally I would call this Canary, but we're going to have more fun and rename it. Sorry, Frank. Sorry, not sorry. So that is going to be Frank's slot.
I do that most of the time with people in the chat, so or my regular.
So yeah, so you're used to being picked on. It's fine.
Yeah.
So we have a Canary environment. I'm going to put it in parentheses Canary so we know it's Canary, and people that might tune in late aren't wondering what Frank's slot is. It is our Canary environment.
You definitely didn't hear me singing.
We could try. We could put you on the spot and ask you to sing a song for us. So yeah, so we're going to do the same parameters we set up before. Now, the little difference is the app service name here, we want to go to production. So it picks up the app service environment that we've set up, which is our production environment. So remember that Canary/Frank slot is a replica production, and it's all built into our production environment. Let me find it again. That's staging, sorry. There we go. So this is all in the app service production here.
Yeah.
We'll differentiate the slot in just a second. So let's go to deploy our app service. So again, it pulls those parameters down. Now, the really cool feature that I like is the tick box here. Deploy to slot or app service environment. And I can see the resource group where I put everything, where I've already built everything. And aha, we have slot. And we have Frank slot. Sorry, Frank. So we can choose that. Now, also just to give a bit of a visual for everyone watching, we can see our Canary environment here as well, our actual Canary slot. But right now we don't have any traffic routing to that. So we're going to leave it as Frank slot. And I'm going to save that. Probably should put a comment, but we're going to be, bad developers and not put a comment. So we have Frank slot. Now, I want to just copy that over and go, yeah, let me clone it to my next environment. So this is copy of Frank slot. We're going to call it production, because this is actually going to be our production environment, our production deployment slot, if you will. So it's pulling in our metrics here. It's pulled everything over. Awesome. But I need to change this slot, because if I don't, I don't see my production slot. So this is one little, I don't want to say bug, issue that I've noticed. When you clone a stage, some of the capabilities, it doesn't allow you to see that production slot. So if I that's actually not what I want to do, because I don't want to deploy to those environments. So really simply, we're just going to delete the stage. Yep, I'm happy with that. So the clone feature on the stages is fantastic. It really is. There's just a little issue, and we've given that feedback when I go to change and pull up my deployment slot. So I'm just going to add a slot. App service environment again, hit apply. I'm going to call it production. Not that I can spell production, which is probably why we shouldn't deploy into it, because I'll break it. And we have our tasks. So I need to set up my subscription again. And our app service name. So we do want to deploy to a slot. So pull in my resource group, in my production environment, slot, production. That's exactly what we want. So I'm going to save that. Prog stage, which sounds much more exciting than prod. Save that and go into our pipeline. Now, the
just
key
to give
here
you a cue on the time, we have 15 minutes left.
Awesome. Well, we won't be lingering about too much, I promise. We've built our stages, which is great, but I don't want to deploy this into production just yet. What I want to do is put in a pre-deployment condition. So I can make these manual, I can make these after release, I can say which stages. So if you have multiple stages and multiple events going on, this is a great thing to do. You can, put it on a schedule even, pull it on a pull request deployment, but I want to put in a pre-deployment approval. I'm going to load myself in again, and Frank's going to be my target of fun. Willing participant. Sorry, it was FRB.
No A.
Right, Frank's going to be my target. So Frank, let me ask you a question. On your email, do you have an email from me about the staging environment?
Right now, you mean?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe because you're not added to my permissions, but that's okay. You should have one.
Oh, yeah, post develop. Yeah.
Yeah, you should have one from me. So you should have the ability to approve it. So
you want me to approve it?
Let me hold on before we do that. I'm going to go into my pipelines. We can see the new release pipeline that I built. And this is the release we've done. Actually, I want to name this. What are we going to name this pipeline, Frank? Not new release pipeline. Give me a creative one. Frank's pipeline?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So we'll save that. Go back to all of our pipelines that we have. So I can see this release that we created earlier. Let's see what it's doing. So I can approve it from here. You can also approve it from your email. But before I approve it, I actually want to go to our staging environment, so our staging website. So this is the staging website. Everyone saw me click on it. I'm going to refresh it now. And it's going to reload. And it's going to work. No. It's not going to work today. That's okay. Let's see. Let's refresh it and see what it does. There we go. A blip in the matrix again. Yay. So we have our free shipping $250 more orders. So I've done all my load testing and I'm happy with my website. And that's great. That's absolutely great. So I go back to my pipeline. I'm going to approve it. And I can override your approval.
I should. Yeah.
Reject it, and then I can override
you just like to cut you.
Yep. And also, other things you can do is view the logs. So if you want to review the logs, look at everything that went through, great. So that succeeded. So if I go to my pipeline, it's been approved, and it should continue on to our next stage. Let's have a look at what it's doing. Should continue on. Or did I break it? I might have broken it. Let's create another release because it didn't add in the other stages. So there we go. So if I create another release, it's using that same build that we already did. It's going to redeploy to staging, unfortunately, but that will give it just a minute. And we can let it queue and watch it. So what have we done? We've made some changes to our code. We've deployed it in our favorite IDE because it's great. We have set up a new build and release pipeline in Azure DevOps. All our code sitting in GitHub. We've used and leveraged staging slots, deployment slots in Azure Web Apps, and we're building out our stages and our tasks. Now, while this is deploying, I'm just going to go into our application and just show something really cool at the moment while that runs. So we did build out this pipeline, and many people ask, and I haven't seen any questions, can I add multiple things in? Can I add tasks going in this, running in parallel? Absolutely. So let me go back one, and we want to edit our pipeline. So it's running. I'm just going to have a look at the pipeline that we've built. Oops.
We have some question also when you have
time.
Yeah,
go for it.
So one question was, that one may be a little bit longer, but how can I change a configuration file, like in an ASP.NET Core apps, but for any environment?
For any environment. So for the person Anderson Rangel, however you pronounce that, apologies. Are you looking to, so you can pull that out. So are you talking from a web app or any environment, or running from virtual machines? I mean, you can make the change in your code, absolutely, and push that out.
And second question was from Siska DK1, looking to use Azure pipelines. I haven't used it yet. I hope it get approved, because I want to use TeamCity to build the package from Octopus, then deploy it to staging, and then to production. So the question is, so in stage, can I deploy from the same artifact? No, whatever. So the question is, can we deploy the same artifact, or do we need to rebuild it every time?
You can deploy from the same artifact. So what I can do a bit of jiggery pokery. So in my pipeline that's running, I can change my artifact. I can go in and pull, this is my old pipeline that I used, and this is my fallback. So if I'm doing this demo, and in all reality is, I like doing demos live, because if I mess it up, I can DevOps it and make it better. I can actually select my old artifact. And if you look on my screen, you can see that I can have two artifacts. So you can pull in all your artifacts, add them in, and then select which artifacts to deploy from. So yes, so in this, we're using the exact same artifact that we did our build pipeline on. I can have multiple pipelines with the same artifacts, etc. The only thing about having multiple pipelines, I'll just caveat, is it's a lot of complexity to manage. So, keep it simple, but you can add in multiple artifacts here and then decide which one to pull from. So you can use the same one or multiples. And we can add parallel tasks in. So while we're deploying to our Canary/Frank's app environment, I can make changes to other environments, run other tests. I can do an Azure policy deployment. There's all sorts of things I can do. We talked about the different types of deployment strategies. We can do this is built in. So I can apply a blue-green deployment or a canary deployment as well as a parallel task. But we've already set up the pipelines to do this for us in the way that's going to work. So before I take the next question, just want to go back to my staging website because I'm conscious of time. So staging's deployed. That's great. We're going to approve it. It's going to go then. Frank's not going to override me. We're just going to deploy it. And it was automatically approved by Frank because I said so.
No, look carefully. I did approve it.
Oh, you did. We both approved it. Awesome. Look at that.
As soon as
Teamwork.
you open the window, I click.
Oh, teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. Awesome. So this is going to run through. I can run the logs on this pipeline as well. So we're going to let this run through. But yeah, we can run parallel tasks in our pipeline here, and we can add those in. So again, they can use the same artifact, or we can use different ones. So I'm actually looking at some of the questions coming through. I have a single pipeline for two repos as they follow the same path. Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen multiple pipelines pulling into single release pipelines. I've seen multiple release pipelines, maybe either to different environments in Azure or very specifically separately managed things. I tend to see a lot of times when I work a lot with Terraform, we might have multiple build pipelines and then they all deploy into the same release pipeline, if you will. So you can kind of take it one way or the other and find what works best for your organization. But I think keep it simple, don't overdo it, because you have to manage it, maintain it going forward. And the other thing is a lot of organizations try to either migrate from on-premises Azure DevOps server into the cloud, or what is the old TFS. A lot of these things that we build in adds complexity and makes it more difficult to migrate. So those are just things to keep in mind. But it's just a lot of the customization stuff. So yeah, so just watching our pipeline here. Frank's slot is being deployed to, and that's our Canary environment. It should run through in just a moment. So I mean, effectively, we deployed our code to another environment, and it's been running for about 30 seconds. It did take a bit of time to get the host to spin up and do the deployment, but yeah, we're deploying our code pretty quickly, much faster than we would have in a traditional on-premises environment. So hopefully this gets done really quickly. Let's see what it's doing.
Rename my slot the launch slot. Too
late. So actually, I'm going to go into my Tailwind Traders, where'd I put it? Production website. If I click on Frank's slot, it is a deployment slot. So we can see it's an app service slot here, and it's under our production website and what its name is. So we can see the URL is Frank slot, or Tailwind Traders production Frank slot.azurewebsites.net. So it is quite a lengthy name. So right, it looks like that has succeeded. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is, Frank, don't approve the next one, by the way. Click on our Frank's slot, i.e. Canary environment, select it, and see what we get. So what we should have is $250. There we go. So for everyone watching at home, we have production at $100, and we have our Canary / Frank slot environment for $250. So to round this all out and to prove that it works, we're going to have a little bit of audience participation. I'm going to throw up a QR code in a moment, and I want everyone to scan the code. 2 seconds while I flip this for you. Scan the code, and I want you to put into the chat window which environment or which shipping threshold you see. So either putting Canary, or you can call it Frank slot, or production. So I'll give you guys a moment to do that. Scan the QR code.
I will need to hide your camera because you're hiding the, where is it? Guess desktop, this one? Nope. Guess camera. Voila.
Cool. Let me know when you see stuff rolling in. I have all my screens going, but I can't see the chat.
Yeah. Well, right now we just see Matt saying that it worked for him on Android. So now, what do you want people again to do? Just
So if you scan that QR code, you should get, half of you should see the Canary environment, and the other half should see production.
Okay. So people should see 100 or 250, correct?
Yes. Yes. So the Azure Load Balancer should evenly distribute traffic 50%. Is it perfect? Not really. I had a really good question the other day about the load balancer. Is there a way to pull off metrics off of it? Absolutely. Azure Monitor will give you some of that. The log analytics will give you some of that. Go a bit further into application insights. Yeah. Application insights will give you the hits, the spikes, more than what we just see on the screen, and really details how your application is performing in all its components as well. So it looks like we're getting a good split of $100 and $250. I love it when my QR code works. It should work.
It's always like, you prepare all that and...
Yay! It's fine. It's fine. But I have done it before where you only have like a couple people. You're doing a recording and they're like, we got the same thing. I'm like, you need more people, because the Azure Load Balancer uses round robin. So it should effectively go to both, but it doesn't quite keep account. So yeah. So it looks like we have a really good split of 250 versus 100.
Yeah, it's really nice. Very
evenly distributed.
Yeah.
That is what we like to see.
And that's cool. So because people in the chat are coming from all around the globe also. That's always fascinating.
It really is. It really is. So yeah, so that is it. We have built an A/B deployment strategy. We've used Azure Web Apps to help leverage that. And the cost is... to do this is all built-in features. So we're not adding features and cost to our environments. We're not spinning up new infrastructure. We literally deployed a deployment slot in a few minutes. We built out our pipelines, and there we go.
Excellent.
So
and
pretty straightforward.
That's a big plus value if we compare to GitHub, because in GitHub you can have your CI/CD done if you want. But having all that approval where like you need a human intervention and stuff like that, you don't have that in GitHub, right? This is only in Azure DevOps.
Yes, and it's a fantastic feature. So we can also automate those approvals. Some people really, really don't like the manual thing, and I get it, but there's a time and a place for it. And I think a lot of organizations still require that little bit of manual interaction, but we can automate that. And that's something that Azure DevOps has that GitHub doesn't. GitHub Actions is fantastic, but I think also GitHub Actions isn't just CI/CD, it's also that automation aspect. And it's really great, easy ways to automate something built into the platform. So both platforms still have different use cases, but we still heavily use Azure DevOps. So every project I go into with a customer, we use Azure DevOps as a tool, because we are delivering a project, delivering value to the customer, but we use it for, things like Azure boards, but also the CI/CD pipelines, because there's so many great tweaks that we can do, and it is really, really easy to use.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that. I think people seems to really like it, this presentation. Chat, if you are interested about having more DevOps, now it's your time. Drop DevOps or +1 in the chat. I'm really interested. There's not a lot of DevOps on Twitch. I don't know why. Honestly, I found the topic very interesting. But now is your time to raise the flag that you are interested in more DevOps and deployment strategy. So share it in a chat. If you have any questions, because time is flying already, I should end the stream like in the minutes. So if you have any question that pop in your mind, feel free to reach April on Twitter. So the Twitter account is just on top of her, and I will also share in the chat again her bio. She has a blog. She's blogging a lot over there. She's also a LinkedIn, all the social media. Thank you a lot, and we just thank you a lot, April, for spending this time with us. I know I rush you a little bit to get prepared and everything, so thank you a lot. Thank you all of you in the chat for being with us this afternoon. At least for me, it was this afternoon. I don't know for you, but spending time with us. And April, the word of the end. Oh, we should raid someone. Can I have someone? Anything else anything else to add while I'm looking for if we can raid anyone?
Just want to thank everyone for joining. It was great to have you all there. Please do reach out with more DevOps questions. You can reach me on Twitter. Best way to reach me, I'll react much more quicker. Email does not work for me because it's a flood of mess. I have not yet DevOps my inbox, but I do appreciate everyone for joining. I think this is a really great topic. I'm really passionate about it, and I do appreciate all the really good feedback from everyone. Excellent. Have we found someone to raid?
Yeah, you know what? Let's go see Mr. Michael Jolie. He was our guest yesterday, and I think he's still working on the demo. The demo yesterday didn't work. I think he's still working on that. So let's go see him / troll him a little bit. Where is? I changed my interface, and now I'm looking for that. Where is it? Damn it.
Well, you're looking for that Syska DK1. Yes, you can run the build pipelines locally. You can run a local host. You can run them in Azure. You can run them on premises. We quite often have ran them in Azure on virtual machines or VMs, basically. So yes, you can absolutely do that. And there's some advantages to doing it as well.
Found him. Whew.
Time to raid.
Yeah, soon. Come on. Little button.
Push the big red button. Do it.
Okay,
do it.
So send him some love. Build, I cannot say his name, is way too hard. Bald Builder. It's a twisted tongue. I think he did that on purpose for me, so I cannot pronounce his name. So Michael Jolie, thank you everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.